So what does it take to be a great substitute? I actually have the honor or privilege, I guess you would call it, to observe one of the best substitutes I've seen in 20 years of teaching. And I was amazed by what she did. I actually heard about her from another teacher. And so I asked, hey, can I go observe your class? He said, sure, no problem. And so I went and watched her. By the way, we're going to call her Mrs. M, by the way, Mrs. M. I don't want to give out her full name. But I observed Mrs. M. And when I did, I started taking notes on everything she was doing. And so here are the 10 things she did that makes her the best substitute I've ever came around. And hopefully you can adopt some of these and make your life easier next time you have to cover a class. But before we get carried away, let's go and quickly play that intro, and then we'll dive right into it. The first thing is she was prepared. She knew where things were at on the campus. For example, she knew where the teacher lounge was in case she needed to use a restroom or something else. She had that down. She knew the schedule that we had here at the school. So she knew exactly when the class began and when it ended, and there were 2 nutritions, lunch, and all this other stuff. She knew that down. She knew who to contact in the office in case there was any problem. She also just knew the procedures in the school, such as how to give a kid a hall pass and things of all that. So she did her research, and she just knew the fundamentals of the school. And so if you're going to be going to a school, just learn their rules there, the procedures there, so that way when it comes time, you know exactly what they're looking for. The second thing is she was present the moment the students walked in. When they walked into the class, what I mean by that, she was by the door. She was by the door, and as students were walking in, she would say things such, all right, go ahead and have your seat, or remain quiet, sit down, or we'll get started soon, whatever it is. But as soon as students walked in, she didn't necessarily greet each one. It wasn't like, hey, I'm so-and-so. She didn't do that. But as they walked in, she's kind of by the front door, and they're walking in, and she's kind of just telling them what to do. She made her presence known to the students. She wasn't just behind the desk, sitting there, waiting for them all to come in. She was right there as they're coming in and directing them exactly what to do. And part of that was students would come in, they start asking her questions, and she ignored the questions, not in a rude way, but just ignored them because she knew she had to stay focused in that moment. So students would come up there and asking her, hey, what are we doing today? Or, hey, what is your name? And things like that. And she just kind of, once again, she wasn't rude about it. She just, I'll talk to you later about it. And she just quickly kept the focus on the students walking in, making sure she had control of that classroom. Then as soon as that bell rang, she went right to work. And she laid down her rules, her expectations. And here are the 4 rules. First rule, number 1, was this. She said, don't speak unless you raise your hand or you're called upon. Rule number 1. Quite simple, right? Rule number 2, do not get up from your seat. Stay in your seat. That was rule number 2. Rule number 3 was kind of more of a broad one, but it got the message across. Respect your classroom, respect your classmates, and respect your teacher. A big, broad statement, but once again, it just let her know that she's keeping track of things. And then number 4, here's what she told them. She goes, I'm going to be grading you guys as a class. And on the board, she had something down that said, I believe it said behavior and progress, something like that. And she was basically, and you can see, this is the 6th period I observed her, you can see where she graded each of the classes, A, B minus, and so forth. And she let them know, I'm going to be grading you as a class, and I'm going to give this information over to your teacher. The 4th thing is, she went over the assignment for the day. Now, I got to stress, she did not do that. She did not go on to number 4 until she had the entire class under control. So she said her thing, these are my expectations, class is quiet, and then she went over the assignment for the day. In this case, students were actually be on their Chromebooks working on a math assignment, but she told them, hey, you're going to be working on a math assignment, it's going to be on the Chromebook, and just stay focused and no talking. So she painted the big picture of what they're going to be doing the day. But once again, I got to stress, she did not move on to number 4. She did not even get into the instruction or get into the lesson until she knew the class was quiet. And then the 5th thing she did is, as the class is quiet and they started to work on the assignment, she started to take roll. And she would just call out their names, so-and-so are you here, so-and-so are you here, right? And she called out their names. And then, of course, she got the attendance that way. Then she went back to the computer and put it into the computer.
Okay, let's take roll here.
But the key is this: you can hopefully see that the progression, the system she has in place. Getting control of the classroom right away, laying out her expectations right away, and then from there, not even doing the attendance until they're actually working on an assignment. Oh, and this was my favorite one. This is number 6. This was my favorite thing she did, and it's my favorite thing because this is what I do in my class. What she did is, as the students are working on the assignment, she was walking around. That's good. We're all supposed to walk around, right? But she actually was walking around with the seating chart, and she was taking notes on each student. And when I asked her, I said, hey, do you really take notes on each student? She goes, no, not really, not all the time. And then I asked her, and I knew the answer because I knew why I do it. I go, well, if you're not taking notes all the time, why do you walk around with the seating chart pretending like you're going to? She goes, it gives the students the illusion that she's keeping track of their behavior, hence they are held more accountable, and more often than not, their behavior is better. I said, oh my gosh, that is what I do in my class. So even though I'm at a substitute, that's exactly what I do. I always walk around my clipboard just because it looks like I'm keeping track, and I am keeping track of most of the behavior. But for her, she was keeping track of the behavior, but more or less it was just the image she wanted to portray to the students, so that way they were held more accountable. And it worked. It worked. Now, I don't want to give the illusion like the class was like the perfect class and they're sitting there quietly doing the work. No, it wasn't like that at all. And honest, when I cover a class, my goal isn't necessarily make sure everybody's working. My goal is just to keep structure there and make sure nothing crazy happens. And so it wasn't like they're totally dead silent for her. And I wouldn't expect that of any substitute, to be honest with you. But what she did was this, and she was really good at this. She kind of knew I'll call her the threshold. She kind of knew how much was too loud for her. And she was on it right away. She made sure it never got past that level, which was too loud or too out of control or too off task. As soon as she saw that happen or get to that point, she brought them back in again. She would say things like, hey, Josh, let's get focused. Or she would walk around going, shh, something of that sort. Or she would say, looks like some people are off task. Just a way to bring them back in again. And the rhythm I saw of the class went kind of like this. She'd bring them in, and they'd be quiet for a little bit, probably maybe a couple of minutes. And then by minute 5, right around there, it started kind of getting to that level, which was too much for her, which is kind of roughly where my level would be at. And she brought it back in again. All right, it's too quiet. It's too loud. Quiet down. And they get quiet again. And then it kind of be that way for about 5 minutes. It finally gets to a point, and she'd bring it back in. So about every 5 minutes, she had to bring him back. So once again, it wasn't like the class was a perfect class, but she was on top of it. And she would call out things as soon as they got to a point where she realized she had to, otherwise it would snowball into something even worse. She was consistent. What I mean by that is she did that whole thing the entire class period. There wasn't a moment where she took it for granted, like, oh, the class is quiet, I'm going to go sit behind my desk. No, she didn't do that. She didn't do that at all. The class was quiet. She kept on top of it, kept walking around, kept monitoring, had that seating chart, pretending making notes, maybe making notes, got a little louder, called him back again. So she was consistent on the behavior. She was consistent on the pattern of walking around. She did not let up for one moment. And that's huge. That is huge. Then something would happen which would bring the class off track. And if you're a teacher substitute, you probably identify with these things. Class is going pretty good, and you kind of got where you want them at. Next thing, a phone call comes in, and she has to leave her monitoring the students to go answer the phone call. And then, of course, you see the volume go up as that happens. And so that'd be one thing. Another thing that happened, which drove me crazy, probably like drove her crazy as well, would be someone would come to the door knocking to come in or something, and that threw the thing off. And someone had to use the restroom was another thing, or someone had a question when she had to take attendance. All these little things, once again, the whole role she was doing was walking around, but those little things kind of took her away from the walking around. And as soon as that happened, you can see it kind of getting higher and higher, these students' behavior, the escalation, and everything else. But what was great about it is those maybe took a minute for her to do. Attendance, maybe a minute, once she had to go put in a computer. Or someone's at the door, she quickly got it, right? And so she was able to quickly bring him back again. So that was another thing she did, is those things she was consistent, but things did throw her off, but she quickly brought him back again. The ninth thing is she was proactive. She knew the problems before they were going to happen. She knew what things could be a problem before they actually became one. And so I watched her as she's walking around. There is 2 kids that had empty water bottles, right? And she basically walked by and said, "Can I throw in the trash for you?" And they said, "Yeah," and she took it through in the trash. Now that may seem like nothing, but if you're a teacher, you know how this goes, right? Student has a water bottle, sits there for 5 minutes, they get a little bored. What they start doing, they start messing the water bottle, starts making all this noise and brings the class off track. So she's proactive to take care of that. Another thing she was proactive on is she didn't let students answer the door, because she knew if a student got up from the seat to answer the door, that would disrupt the class, because then they'd be talking to the person out there, the person coming in, and you know how these things quickly go off the tracks. And so I remember students started to get up to answer the door. She goes, I got it. And the student sat back down again. And she would answer the door. Proactive. She knew where that could go. And I love the way she handled students. There's a student that's off track, right? He was probably more of the problem student in the class. And she came up to him, she goes, I'd really prefer you actually staying here getting the work done, but if you need to go to the office, I can send you to the office. Did you want to go to the office? Oh my gosh, that was magical, because it wasn't threatening. It was saying, here's your 2 choices, right? I prefer you staying here, but if you need to go to the office, I can send you to the office. So she gave the student the choice, do you want to go to the office? That way it was not threatening everything else, but yet she got a point across that, and she dealt with that in such a wonderful way. So those are different ways in which she was proactive. And the last thing that brings it all together, that wraps this big thing into a beautiful artwork, is her demeanor. She was calm and assertive the entire time. She didn't let things rattle her. She didn't get emotional about things. She didn't get angry. She didn't get overly excited. She was just calm kind of the entire way through, and assertive. Not being a bully, not yelling at students, but this is my expectations, I'm holding you to it. And if students kind of deviate from that, she called them on it right away. So their overall demeanor just made this all thing come together. Thank you for watching the video. If you like what you saw, please hit the subscribe button or click on one of the other links.